Welcome to the Ashley Neville Show. I have a very special guest with me today. He is a basketball god and has a way of predicting things before they happen. He is a top NBA prospect specialist and goes by the nickname Yoda. Please help me welcome the owner of Sports Talk 2319, Rashad Phillips. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Ashley. Thanks for having me on your show. I've been wanting to get on your show for so long. I've watched it from afar. You do a tremendous job of getting the truth out of everybody. So I feel like I'm on a hot seat with you.
No, I'll take it easy on you. It's funny because when we finish the conversations, they're like, whoa, I thought that was like a therapy session.
Yeah.
So, I like getting guys to feel comfortable. And I think you do such a great job too. You built your own show, and I just love the way that you evaluate players, evaluate the game. But before we get started, I want to dedicate this episode in particular to the late Kobe Bryant. It has been 1 year since his passing, and it has taken such a toll on the basketball world. What was your favorite moment about Kobe, or maybe a special time that you saw him play, or it could be on or off the court?
For me, I met Kobe back in high school in 1996. So, I'm showing my age there. But in high school, he was obviously he was a great player, but I got to know him a little bit off the court, and just a wonderful person inside out. And being able to compete with him, against him in high school, and really get that blessing from him really helped propel me to be, a pretty good player moving forward. Because in high school, as a teenager, you go through, you doubt yourself all the time. You look in the mirror, am I good enough? Is it this? Is it that? And to play against Kobe Bryant and to kind of get that voucher from him going into college was one of the main forces behind me having some success at the next level.
So for people who follow me who might not know about you, can you give them a little bit of background about who you are? Obviously, you played basketball and you were very, very good. I saw some of the old clips that people post, and you were almost impossible to defend. Can you share a little bit about how you started?
Yeah.
And also a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, I was a kid that kind of was born to play basketball. I'm a coach's son. My father ran a community center. I'm from Detroit, east side of Detroit. I grew up under the likes of Chris Webber, Steve Smith, those type of guys, coming up as a kid, following them, and got a chance to be really good. I was kind of one of those child prodigies. I was like 7 years old, playing with 10-year-olds, averaging 30 points and so forth. And, went on to high school and became an all-state high school player. And again, competing against Kobe at the Magic Round Ball Classic against the top 19 players in the country, where I walked away with the MVP. I went on to University of Detroit, considered a small mid-major college. From then, I was an All-American, two-time All-American in college, won a Naismith Award. My numbers retired, and still the all-time leading scorer, all-time winningest player, all-time free throws, three-pointers. Every award you can name, it's still there in the rafters at the University of Detroit. Went on and played 8 years overseas, had a fantastic career there, retired, started my own training academy in Michigan, where it was the top training academy in the state. I had over 250 kids in my academy. And I transitioned over and moved to Orlando, Florida, where I started my own sports media company called Sports Talk 2319, where I started to evaluate players and give players of all calibers a platform to be the voice for them. I was able to discover guys like Ja Morant and so forth. And now I am the host of my own podcast, the 101 Podcast by Rashad Phillips. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys at home with that story.
No, I actually just learned some things. I think that's amazing. And I think people don't even realize how important it is to do what you do in terms of evaluating players who need that voice. And I know that was a question I wanted to ask you about media and where it's going.
Yeah.
What kind of gaps do you think need to be filled in terms of that? And then also, I kind of want to touch base on the positions that you
Yeah.
wrote up that if people aren't familiar with, it's going to be a whole new way of evaluating talent. And it's not just the traditional point guard, shooting guard, power forward, small forward. It's going to be changed now. So I want to hear a little bit more about that and how you came up with that.
Yeah, those are great questions. When I look at the landscape of media, I think what's missing is the purity of the game has escaped media. I think that we, in general, the people, we gravitate more to gossip, we gravitate more to negativity, opposed to gravitating to the authenticity of the game, the purity of the game, and the essence of it. So what I try to provide from my media platform, my little soapbox, is bringing the purity and the transparency back to the sports side of media things. Obviously, me being a former player, I try to give everybody a glimpse behind the curtain on what the game looks like through my eyes personally. And that's kind of how I came up with my positions dictionary. When you look at everything around us, Ashley, when you look at phones, you look at TVs, you look at cars, you look at computers, all of that, there's an evolution that has taken place. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the game of basketball, the players, there's an evolution with the players, they have evolved, but the terminology hasn't. And I felt that just sitting back studying the game, that it needed a terminology makeover for the greater good of the game, to help all of us identify all of these wonderful new species of player. Mm-hmm. So I came up with this dictionary with adding 7 new positions with the additional 5. So you have traditional guard, point guard, combo guard, hybrid guard. You have shooting guard, you have small forward, then you have dual forward, then you have hybrid post, stretch big, power forward, center, and point center. So I came up with that, and it's really giving people a chance to be able to identify what you're actually watching on TV instead of the typical 5: point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center, because there's no way you can fit 15, 16, 20 different styles into 5 slots. I think it's unfair to the game of basketball, to the player and the watcher.
You know, I would have to agree with you on that. And I know that me and you text a lot because I'll ask you questions. I like to pick your brain. I'll ask you, like, who's this player? Like, what do you define him as? And, what you mentioned is it is doing a disservice to basketball, not just in the sense of like having it all written down next to their name, but when it comes to evaluating the talent. And I've asked you about other players who didn't seem to quite make it in the NBA, and because they were being evaluated wrong and they were being given the wrong position.
Correct.
So how can this help talent evaluators? So I'm talking, NBA scouts.
Yes.
Have you talked to any of these NBA scouts about this?
Absolutely. And I've talked to a few, and they all actually love it. I mean, because it's really like a cheat sheet, so you can actually get to your answers quicker. Let's just take Draymond Green for an example. There's hundreds of examples, but I want to use Draymond Green. He was a player that was misevaluated because he was placed in the wrong slot. And he was called a tweener around the NBA circle. And that's not a good term to be called a tweener. There's been other players that has been called that same term that have not been drafted because they were called tweeners. So my position dictionary was able to slot Draymond Green as a hybrid post. Guys like Anthony Davis, guys like Bam Adebayo, those guys are hybrid posts. If the term hybrid post and the definition would have been active during Draymond Green's time, Draymond Green would have been a top 10 pick, in my opinion. The reason he slipped to the second round is because he was slotted wrong, because there was only 5 slots. So when you look at the landscape of that, when you're able to slot players in their rightful slots, it helps you evaluate and actually put the right players in position for you to draft.
See, that's really interesting, and it kind of leads me to my next question. Is I know that you are evaluating talent around the clock. I don't even know how you have time because you're finding guys at schools that don't get the media coverage. You're finding the games, and I know that you're constantly looking through game film.
Yeah.
So I just want to know, like, I know you mentioned, Mason Jones with the Houston Rockets finally getting the
Yeah.
opportunity to shine. You have a guy like Luguentz Dort down in OKC. Both of these players went undrafted, but I mean, you had them pretty high ranked on your list, whether it was top 30, top 40
Yeah.
players. What happened with them? And how do you go about evaluating talent?
Great. That's a phenomenal question because when I look at talent and when I evaluate, Ashley, what I do is I remove all narratives. I just watch the game in its purity.
Mhm.
And let's take Mason Jones for an example. This is a kid right now, currently, that maybe is the most efficient rookie in this year's class right now. He's started a few times. He's led Houston in scoring. He went undrafted. Mason Jones was ranked 27th on my board. He got a first round grade. ESPN had Mason Jones ranked in the 70s. So that kind of tells you that the different lenses that evaluators are looking through. Through my lens is that there's a purity, there's an unbiasedness, there's not a narrative there. If Mason Jones would have had that same type of statistical output in a Kentucky uniform, he would have been a top 10 pick. You see that? You see what I did there?
Mm-hmm.
See, narratives a lot of times get players drafted or undrafted. In this sense, you look at Mason Jones and you look at Dort, another kid that I was extremely high on because I just removed all of the narrative and just watched the purity of their games. And that's why they got those grades from me. So that's why a lot of times you see I'm way up here on the player that nobody's heard about and somebody else is not, because you got to take off those glasses and just look at the purity of the game.
So you would think that these NBA teams who are dealing with millions of dollars, that they would take a second to maybe step back and not just pay attention to the narratives, but pay attention to, is this guy gonna win me games? Is this guy gonna help us, lead us to the promised land? And I don't understand. I guess I do understand the politics of the things that go on in sports, but then you just ask yourself, like, why?
Yeah, you do ask yourself that, but it is a business, and there's a lot of moving parts behind curtains in business, and a lot of times teams maybe not necessarily want to take this player because they don't like his agent. They may not want to take this player because they don't like his college coach. Like there's a lot of things that go on behind the curtains, and sometimes the kids get punished for it because somebody else has a viewpoint on somebody that's connected to them or what have you, or a media story that's been put out on this kid, or somebody has created red flags behind this kid's names. There's a lot that goes on behind the curtains that I still believe that are unfair to a lot of these kids.
Yeah, the red flags, because when I used to, cover certain colleges back in the day, I'd get phone calls from GMs and scouts and things like that. And I wouldn't give them all the information just because that's not cool. Like, I don't want to, jeopardize someone's chances from making it in the NBA and being successful. But they do have a lot of red flags with certain players. And, one in particular did get drafted, and he's still in the NBA and he's playing very well. But it's just, there was red flags on his name just based on, I want to say, like, from when he was growing up, like when he was in like middle school. And I was like, middle school? I'm like, even high school, I'm like, people are completely different. They're changed by then. Like, so I understand that they have to do their due diligence in terms of trying to find out as much as they can about a player. But it gets to a point where it's like, you either like the guy or you don't, based on his play. So for you, I know that you can tell when someone's going to be an NBA caliber player. What goes into it for you?
Well, for me, it's because when I was a player, I was pretty good. So when you're a good player, you tend to know what another good player looks like.
Mhm.
You know, so for me, I think that gives me a little bit of a cheat sheet over someone that probably didn't play that wasn't great at it, right? No.
I didn't play. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit it. I'll be the first one to admit it.
No, it's but I'm just saying this is what gives me an advantage
Okay.
is the fact
Okay.
that I was pretty much a great player my entire career. So
Mhm.
it's the old saying, it takes one to know one,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So for me, I know what a great player looked like 10 seconds into the film.
Mhm.
Now, when I start digging into the player and start really watching and honing in on what can make them a high level player, I start to look at style. I start to look at mannerisms. I start to look at the intangibles. And I kind of put it all in the pot, stir it up, and then I come up with it and was like, yeah, John Morant's going to be a superstar one day. You
Mhm.
know, that's kind of how it works for me.
And John Morant, another question that I had for you, has been playing phenomenal, even coming off that injury.
Yeah.
He had a big win against the Phoenix Suns, who are also, a top team in the
Yeah.
West this season. Where do you see him going?
I think the sky's the limit for John Morant. I really do. I just think the kid has so much superstardom. He's so well versed. He's a terrific kid. He has this magnetism about him that makes his surroundings better. You like being in his presence, and that's what a gift that quarterbacks and great point guards have.
Mhm.
You want to be around them. John Morant brings that to the table for the Memphis Grizzlies. I do think that he will get the Grizzlies to the playoffs year in and year out, and ultimately get them to the finals because he's really that good. He's a fantastic leader, and I'm excited to see what the future brings for him.
Another guard. So I know that we talk a lot about bigs, and we'll get there. But
Yeah,
another guard is Trae Young with the Atlanta Hawks. And I'll be
yeah,
honest when I say that there was something about him in college that I just wasn't really sold on. I
yeah.
don't know what it was. I know you saw that. You
I,
remember that? Oh wow, you remember that from I don't even know how many years ago.
I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll own up to it. I regret it because now I watch him and I'm just like, man, like
Yeah,
this kid, like he's just next level. Like I don't even
yeah,
know what more to say about him and his game. It's just to a
yeah.
point where he's going to be right up there with John Morant in terms of playoffs, in terms of
Oh,
all-star appearances. I mean, what can you say about his game and what he's done in Atlanta so far?
I think Trae Young is the heartbeat to Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
the city in itself, because what he brings. Trae Young is what Allen Iverson was to Philadelphia. That's what he is to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And he's gotten off to a terrific start. I mean, he's already been in the All-Star game. Last year, he was like, what, second in scoring and second in assists.
Mm-hmm.
Now they've surrounded him with some better players. The wins will start to pile up. And I just think that he has a chance to be the MVP of the league. I think over the next 3 to 4 years, Trae Young will be hoisting up an MVP trophy. And again, this kind of goes into my CP3 thing, and we'll talk about that later. But I
Mm-hmm.
just believe that the NBA, they don't like giving little guys the biggest award. And I think Chris Paul and Trae Young will fall under that kind of punishment of not receiving the highest reward of MVP of the NBA. I think professional sports, they don't like to glorify the regular size person. And I look at CP3 and Trae Young, guys that I believe should be MVPs of the league because they're that dominant and special.
See, that's interesting. So when you evaluate an MVP, like I want everyone has their own, I
Yeah,
guess you could say their own recipe for an MVP. When you think of MVP, there has to be many different,
yeah,
categories for it. So for
yeah,
you, when you see a player and you're like, that's an MVP this year,
yeah.
like break that down for me.
I think I think people in itself, I think the media, the people, they move the goalpost depending on who's the kicker. And that's the problem with the MVP trophy. I believe Chris Paul should have won MVP at least twice in his career already.
Mhm.
Um, when you look at the word, what the letters MVP, V meaning valuable. I believe Chris Paul has been the most valuable player to his franchise at least twice in his career. I mean, he did it in the Clippers. He did it last year in OKC, and it looks like he's doing it this year in Phoenix. So that's kind of how I gauge the MVP. Of course, LeBron James can win MVP every single year. Okay, this is not to take away from that, but LeBron already has 4, and I think he may win one. I think he's going to win it this year. But the fact that Chris Paul doesn't have at least one MVP, it's really bad for the sport. And like I said, professional sports, they don't like to glorify the regular size person. And there's a resentment to smaller players being dominant in professional sports. It just is. And I hate to say that, but I just look at the data and say, Allen Iverson was an MVP, rightfully so. Steve Nash won it back-to-back. And I believe Chris Paul should have won at least one. And I believe Trae Young will put himself in position to win at least one if you don't move the goalposts.
So I think it's also interesting that you mentioned, CP3, obviously doing a lot here in Phoenix. I think it was a really a great pickup for the Phoenix Suns. I saw like some people posting some things, and like I don't like getting caught up in it, but of course there's going to be people saying, is he going to stop Devin Booker's growth and blah blah blah. And I was just like, let's just like hold on for a second and realize the caliber of player Chris Paul is, and he will make an impact wherever he goes.
Absolutely. I mean, let's take last year for an example. OKC was slotted to be, the worst team in the West, one of the worst teams in the West, and he took them to the playoffs. Again, he's showing his valuable. Here's a saying that I have. There's a size bias in handing out monumental awards in professional sports. And I believe Chris Paul is the epitome of that statement. There's a size bias in handing out monumental awards in professional sports. And Chris Paul is the epitome of that.
Why?
I don't make the rules.
But I just want things to be fair.
That I would like things to be fair as well, but that's just not life.
Right.
We have to address what's in our face. The best place to hide is in plain sight. And I think this is something that's in plain sight, Ashley. When you get off of this interview with me, go look up 6-foot MVPs in any league. Any league. Professional sports are biased to handing out monumental awards to smaller people. Chris Paul, go look at Chris Paul's history. Look at his career. You're not telling me that this guy shouldn't have won an MVP at least one time in his career. You go Google it yourself. And then you go look in the NFL and tell me that a smaller quarterback should win MVP. Now I think Drew Brees won it one time, somewhere around there. But again, I stand by my statement.
I mean, I was looking at the MVPs in the NBA at least, and I did kind of see the correlation of size. And I mean, the last ones that we've seen have been bigs, a couple bigs, and then we've seen, James Harden, Kevin Durant. I mean, Russell Westbrook, he won one, but I mean, there's always the outliers. There's the ones that kind of break the bias or break what you are, there's always like the select few. But obviously, if we give more attention to it, maybe something will stick. Maybe ESPN or some of these, NBA GMs might start to open their eyes a little bit more. I don't know.
It's the people that vote, Ashley. It's the voters. The voters don't like to glorify small people because they like to look at the bigger guys like Giannis and give him MVP because he looks like an alien, like he's 7 foot tall, he's this and that. And instead of really handing out MVPs to a person like Chris Paul, who has a commercial with State Farm basically showing you like I'm a regular looking person. I could be a State Farm agent. Like there's hidden messages in those commercials, people. Chris Paul is basically telling you, yeah, I'm only 5'11", and if you didn't know I was a basketball player, I would look like I sell insurance. That's him mocking the industry, saying that I'm actually a extra talented individual, even though I don't look like it. You know, like it's right there in our face.
I didn't even think about that. I didn't even pick that up.
That's why they call me Yoda.
Yes, I love that. But I do want to transition to the bigs, and I do want to give them some love because I think that they are changing the game, the evolution of the big man.
Yeah.
Nikola Jokic, I think he's right now top 3 in assists for a big, and he's like, what, 6'11", almost 7 feet. And then you got a guy like Joel Embiid, who's in the top 5 of scoring. He can also pass the ball well. He can read the floor. And then you also got a guy like Giannis too, who we see is basically sometimes he can play the point guard too. And I think it's just interesting that we're seeing a lot of point centers, as you would put it. It's a lot different than what we would term a big man back in the day, where we would just assume that they were in the post dunking all day long. And then now we're seeing them all over the floor. So what can you say about the evolution of the bigs and where the game is going?
Yeah, when I look at Giannis, Giannis to me is a dual forward. That's one of my terms. He plays a dual forward position. The dual forward position is kind of originated from guys like Grant Hill, and then LeBron James kind of took it and just, kind of made it his own fingerprint. But you look at guys like LeBron James, who's a dual forward, Luka Doncic, who's a dual forward, Giannis is a dual forward. So those guys are kind of really brought that position to life. But when you look at the bigs like a Jokic and Embiid, what they bring to the table is extra versatility for guys that size, which makes them sometimes the most dangerous person on the floor, because a person of that size that possess so much skill can inflict so much damage on the game with their skills. They're kind of like rare today. There's only one Jokic in the NBA. There's only one point center, and Joel Embiid is just kind of a little bit of everything. He kind of has an imagination for the game. He loves the bright lights, and I think there's a 6'1" type of guard in his mind. Sometimes when you watch him play, he's like going through his legs trying to make plays. So the NBA is in good hands with bigs like those two.
I would agree. And also a guy like Kevin Durant, who I think is right up there. If we're going to ever say the best player in the NBA, he's right there with LeBron.
Yeah, Kevin Durant is a top 3, top 4 scorer to ever touch a basketball. You got Michael Jordan, you got Kobe Bryant. Those are 1 and 2 for me. And then you may have a guy like for me, like a Bernard King. If Bernard King never tears his knees up in the 80s, he's one of the tremendous scorers. And then you got Kevin Durant for me. So Durant is something that comes out of a created player edition, 7 foot, that has terrific handle. But one thing that I love about Kevin Durant that nobody really talks about is his intelligence on the court. Like Kevin Durant really understands the angles, and he understands the pace of the game. And you combine that with the skill set and his size, it's made him one of the most unguardable players to ever step foot on the court.
Because even when you're guarding him, he's going to shoot right over you. Doesn't matter. So then I need to ask about the Nets, and where we've been seeing Kevin Durant, Kyrie, James Harden all playing together. So far, I mean, they haven't really played enough. It's a small sample size for me to really get an idea of the bigger picture, right? I mean, everyone's so quick to jump in and, they're going to be horrible. It's not going to work out. It's like, all right, like let's pump the brakes here. Let's give it some time. Like they still need time to gel. What is your analysis so far? And do you think that they're going to at least make it to the finals this year?
Yeah, right now I just think they're still learning each other.
Mhm.
You know, when you put three dominant players on one team, I don't never worry about the three dominant players. I worry about their teammates
Mm.
and how they're going to spread out those guys getting shots and finding their roles. Um, right now, Brooklyn is just kind of filling themselves out. They've lost a couple to Cleveland, and you never hit the panic button with guys like that. The Nets will be in the finals against the Lakers.
Mhm.
It will be a hard fought out series. I believe that the Lakers will win in six, and that's what it's going to be. But what Kyrie, what he brings to the table, what Harden, what he brings to the table, and we just broke down Kevin Durant. I don't see a team beating them four times in the playoff series. I just
Wow.
don't see it happening. They're just anytime we've seen big threes, they don't lose. We've seen LeBron, Wade, Bosh. We've seen that big three. I mean, so we've seen it before, and it will be the same result.
I agree. I got the Lakers, Nets. I got the Lakers winning. I will say maybe to seven games.
I can see that.
I'm gonna say seven, just because, like you said, it's pretty hard to stop three dominant players like that. But I'm never, ever, ever gonna bet against LeBron James ever again. It's like year after year, it's like the media wants like to create the narratives, right?
Yeah.
And they want to and it's like, the Lakers or LeBron will have, maybe a 3-game losing streak. And then suddenly, oh, do they have what it takes to, win it all? And like, they get in my head. But you know what? I made a promise to myself that I'm never going to second guess him. And after what he's still doing in the league at 36 years old is just remarkable. I don't know if we're ever going to see someone dominate the game in the way that LeBron James has.
I agree. I think I'm gonna take it further, Ash. I think LeBron James might be the greatest athlete ever. And you may look at guys like Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson. You have to put LeBron James in that same category. What he's been able to do. Here's a kid that was on the front of Sports Illustrated at 16 years old with the world on his shoulders, and boy, has he delivered. Championships, championship appearances, the way that he has elevated his surroundings. He has just been, just phenomenal. And again, you would be a fool to bet against him. Also, Tom Brady, like he's just in that iconic stage of his career where everything he touches turns to gold. That's kind of the stage that LeBron's at right now. He's at like that iconic stage. We watched Michael Jordan go through a iconic stage. We watched Kobe Bryant go through a iconic stage. We watched Tom Brady go through an iconic stage. And now we're watching LeBron James go through an iconic stage. So that's a stage in professional sports that only few people can even get to. It's like when you go to a fancy hotel, Ashley, they got like it stops at like 20 floors, and then they have like they got like the other floors, but you have to have a certain key to get to the other levels.
Mm-hmm.
That's what LeBron is in his career. He's at a level that nobody else has the key to. So those are my flowers for LeBron James.
I mean, and the stuff that he does off the court, no one can say anything about this man. It's like it's the thing is when you do have the world, constantly criticizing you, watching you have the spotlight on you 24/7. It's like we've just seen LeBron evolve into I could just tell he just doesn't care what anyone thinks anymore.
Why should he? Why should he?
He shouldn't. That's the thing is like it's just watching these guys develop and mature and just go out there and play so free. And like we saw like last night how he mentioned that someone was cheering for just after he missed his free throw.
Yeah.
And he just turned a switch on. He's like, oh, okay, it's like that. All right, I'm about to drop 30 or how much did he have? 48?
Yeah, 40.
40. But he's like, it's just the way that he can turn it up, and everything that he does off the floor. I think needs to be commended even more is that, you know, he doesn't have to do all of that, and he wants to. And I think it's awesome that he has a school,
Yes.
and he's changing so many people's lives. He's
Yeah.
also, and what I do love too is that him and other players, kind of like what me and you like to do, is they are developing their own media,
Yeah.
telling their own stories, which I think is definitely the change that they needed to see in the game. But I wanted to ask you. I mean, obviously, we're still loving what LeBron's doing. I don't want to get too much into the future, but I want to know who that next. There'll never be another LeBron James, but I want to know who he's passing the torch to. Who is going to provide that level of hype every night? Who's going to be that guy that everyone has to go watch? Who's always going to set the timer, you know, on their phone to know that when the
Yeah.
game is coming on? Who has that same level of excitement?
Nobody.
Nobody. Really.
No.
So once LeBron's retired, there's not going to be like a face of the league where everyone's like, wow, this is
No,
our guy.
I think we're at a stage now in the NBA where it will be multiple faces that represent the NBA that make up what LeBron James is. One person can't cover what LeBron James is blazing. It's impossible for one player to cover the trail of what LeBron James just did. I don't even think it's fair to put that on one player. I think you're gonna have Giannis, you're gonna have Trey Young, you're gonna have Luka, you're gonna have Ja Morant. Like you're gonna have the NBA is gonna be made up of multiple faces that equals LeBron James. I think all of them together can equal what LeBron James is leaving behind. There's not one person to pass the torch to, like when Kobe left and passed the torch to LeBron, and when Jordan left, he passed it to Kobe. This generation doesn't have a LeBron James. So we got to get past that because there isn't another one. LeBron James is a one of one.
I know, but it makes there's gonna be someone not equal to LeBron, but it's going to bring that same kind of level of play, that same
No,
hype. There has to be someone.
there can't be one person to bring what LeBron James brings, and that's the media part of you that you want to anoint one person to fill the void of LeBron James. It can't be filled with one person. It can be filled with multiple people. That's what I'm saying. That void will be filled, but instead of setting your timer to watch one player, you may set it to watch Luka one night, and then Trey Young one night, and then Ja Morant one night, and then Giannis one night. That will be the makeup of the NBA, in my opinion. In my opinion, that's just how I see it.
I respect it. I mean, I still do that now. I still have multiple games up at once, and I'm still kind of watching, you know, all the star players of each night. So then I guess you're gonna have the same answer for every other player that I'm about to name of who they're passing the torch to, because we have Kevin Durant. Is there another player that we see has Kevin Durant-like qualities? Steph Curry. Is there another player that we see that can do what Steph Curry does?
No. And I think that's what we do as fans, right? We want to duplicate the heroes of the game. And that's okay because we love them. Like, so we want to keep them going. So we try to find some another player to vicariously live through them with our admiration for LeBron and KD and Steph. But I just believe when those guys step away from the game, we won't be able to see those type of players again. We may get a few guys that maybe can mimic it, but we're talking about guys that help change the game. Steph Curry has revolutionized the game with the three-point shot. I don't think we'll ever see that again. I think we'll see flashes of Steph's brilliance, sprinkles of him through players, but not one player taking on his entire repertoire of what he brought to the table. And Kevin Durant, again, I don't know if we're going to see 7-foot guys that can play like a guard at that capacity. I just don't think we'll see it. And this is not taken away from anything. It's actually showing how amazing that Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and LeBron James is, and how we should appreciate them before they walk out the door, because I don't think we're going to see those guys again.
So I want to take it one step further then. Okay, I'm going to challenge you on this.
Here you go. Here you go.
I have to. Come on, I have to. This is fun for me. So we've seen guys like, Michael Jordan change the game in a way, and then we see a guy like, and then Kobe kind of mimicked a little bit of what Michael Jordan did. But I mean, to me, they're both very, very similar, both, on and off the court.
Sure.
And then you had LeBron James change the game. And then now you had Steph Curry change the game when it came to shooting. And the whole Warriors team, for that matter, completely just changed the game in terms of how other teams are bringing in players and only focusing on small ball and shooting. And then you have a guy like Kevin Durant, like we just mentioned, who's just a different animal. And then now we're seeing a guy like Jokic, who's taking the big man to a next level, where he's basically playing point guard out there.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be another element of the game that's going to change? And what do you think that's going to be? Is there already a player in the league that's maybe doing it?
I don't know. That's a tough question. All I could look at is the art of the game where it is today and say that it's in good hands. I don't know if you can evolve the game any more than what it is already. Like, we're seeing 7-foot guards and 7-foot point centers and high flying dunks from the point guard position. I think the game is at its premium right now. I think we're in the iPhone stage of the NBA. That's like saying, is there going to be another phone that can outdo the iPhone? And I don't think so. I think we're in the stage of the iPhone. So I don't know if we could mentally take ourselves to say if we can outdo what we're glamoring over right now. So that's kind of a tough question, because I think we're at the premium stage of professional sports right now.
That was a great analogy. That was great because it makes sense, but I always think that there's going to be someone that goes a step further, someone that pushes the needle a little bit more. I just don't know who, and I don't know what until it happens. But I didn't know if maybe, I know you have all these little secrets and, you can always predict the future. So I was like, maybe he knows something that I don't know. Like, I don't know.
You crazy.
Just a little bit. I get that a lot. But then just a couple more questions. I know that we're almost like on here for an hour, and I really appreciate your time. There's certain things that are leaked to the media that should technically be kept in the locker room. I don't need to go into details or specifics on some of those things, but obviously people can Google it, and people, who are big basketball fans already know what I'm talking about with two different scenarios in particular. Do you think those are leaked on purpose?
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I mean, everybody has a motive, right? Like, everybody wakes up in the morning with some type of motive, whether your motive is positive or negative or whatever it is. Everyone wakes up with a motive. So yeah, to answer your question, yes.
For those who, again, want to follow you, and I highly recommend they do, where can you tell them to go?
You can find me on Twitter at RP3Natural. And you can find me on Instagram, Rashad Phillips 2319.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It was an honor. It was a pleasure to be on your platform. Hopefully you'll invite me back.
Absolutely.